Jake was a talented barista. He made great coffee and knew the names of nearly every regular, but behind the ever-present smile was a quiet, nameless emptiness. One day, amid the hum of grinding beans and the rich scent of espresso, a stranger asked a simple question that made him freeze. "Why are you here?" What seemed like an innocent inquiry became the spark that lit up a part of Jake's memory he thought had long been buried. 3 years ago, Jake had been a computer science student at a well-known university in San Francisco. He loved coding, pulling all-nighters to build apps, earning the nickname "the World Builder" from his peers. But pressure from his family, constant comparisons, and unspoken expectations slowly turned that passion into a burden. One bad grade, a failed presentation, a cutting remark from his father each chipped away at his confidence until he believed he simply wasn't good enough. He dropped out, cut ties with his old circle, and moved to Seattle to start over, or so he told himself. In truth, Jake was running. And in the small cafe where he now worked, that escape felt comfortable. No expectations. No challenges. No failure. Day after day, he made coffee, cleaned tables, listened to customers' stories. Occasionally, a regular would ask, "What did you study? You seem to know a lot about computers." Every time, Jake would give a sheepish smile and dodge the question, "Oh, just taught myself a little here and there." Over time, even he began to believe it. That he was just a barista. It was safe. Simple. Low risk. But the emptiness inside never really left. It just lay dormant, waiting for a signal to stir. And then that day, the woman, a stranger, eyes sharp, laptop covered in lines of code, threw everything off course. Her question wasn't judgmental, but to Jake, it felt like a call from somewhere deep within. "Why are you here?" He couldn't answer. Not because he had no answer, but because he had too many. Too many reasons, and none of them truly honest. That was the first moment in 3 years he saw his life as if from the outside. He didn't know it yet, but that one question would lead him back to the path he once abandoned, only this time, as someone entirely new. All afternoon, Jake's mind kept circling back to the woman's question. "Why are you here?" It repeated like a bugged-out line of code, looping in his head, keeping him from focusing. When she came back for a coffee refill, Jake took a chance and asked, "So, what do you do? You look like a coder." She gave a small smile. "Good eye. I'm a software engineer. Just joined a startup recently." Jake nodded, trying to play it cool, but inside, it felt like someone had cracked open an old door he'd spent years trying to keep shut. Her name was Mara, probably in her early 30s, sharp but easy to talk to. Over the next few visits, they chatted more. It started with tech talk, then shifted to new trends, AI, frameworks Jake used to know, and surprisingly still remembered. Mara noticed his natural understanding, something that didn't quite match a barista who'd just dabbled a little. One quiet afternoon, she asked him out of the blue, "You studied programming, didn't you?" Jake froze. His instinct was to deflect, like always, but this time, for some reason, he nodded. Dropped out, because of some stuff, he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. Stuff? Stuff that makes you feel like you're just not good enough. Mara didn't press further. She simply pulled out her phone, brought up a meetup event, and showed it to him. This Saturday. Demo night for indie devs. Nothing formal, just people sharing whatever they're working on. Wanna come? Jake almost said no. The idea of walking into a room full of real coders made him feel like a kid who wandered into the wrong class. But in the end, he didn't even know why he nodded. Saturday, he showed up late. Stood at the door for a long minute, hesitant, like he was waiting for someone to pull him in like a lost kid among a herd that wasn't his. But the meetup wasn't what he expected. No hotshots. No lectures. No pressure. Just people who loved what they were building, sharing like they were telling stories. A girl demoed an app that reminded her to drink water because she used to forget all day. A dad showed a spelling game he made for his son. A guy turned an old piano into a MIDI controller. Jake sat still, listening. And all at once, it hit him, he'd been here before. He belonged in this world. And the scariest part wasn't that he had walked away from it, but that he had forgotten how much he used to love it. Beneath the warm lights of that small community hall, for the first time in years, something stirred in Jake's chest. Not because of anything grand, but because of something quiet and familiar, something he hadn't had a name for in a long time. On the way home from the meetup, Jake didn't listen to music like he usually did. His headphones hung loosely around his neck, but his mind had already slipped into reverse, back to the old days. A small room lit only by his laptop screen glowing deep into the night, the rush of his first successful program, that weightless feeling of creating something from nothing. Those memories weren't as faded as he thought. They had just been buried under years of dust and the fear of failure. The next day, he dug out the old laptop he had shoved into a drawer when he first moved to Seattle. The battery was dead, the screen scratched, the hard drive clicked with every spin, but it still worked. He reopened his old projects, messy lines of code filled with raw passion. He clicked on an unfinished Python script and laughed out loud when he saw a note he'd left for himself. "Eat something, you idiot." That familiarity didn't make him feel behind. If anything, it felt like reuniting with a piece of himself that had been locked away. And in that moment, Jake didn't feel like he wasn't good enough anymore. He realized he had simply abandoned himself. That night, he sent Mara a message. "I want to start learning again. Doesn't matter where." She replied almost instantly. "Start with you. The knowledge? We can train that." And just like that, a new journey began. Every night after his shift, Jake carved out 2 to 3 hours to relearn the basics: HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Git. Things that once came naturally now felt like relearning an old language, slow at first, then gradually smoother. He enrolled in a free online web development course. Some nights were frustrating, others overwhelming, but this time, he didn't quit. He started applying what he learned to small problems around the cafe. A mini app to track coffee bean inventory. A simple loyalty points system for regulars. A dashboard to manage shift schedules. Soon, the manager started asking, "Where'd you learn to do this stuff?" Jake just smiled. No more deflecting. No more just tinkering around. One night, Mara met him at their usual spot. She placed a small fabric bag on the table. Inside was a used MacBook and a printed job sheet. Front-end developer, intern. Remote. 3 months. Full-time support. With mentor. Jake stared at her, wide-eyed. "For me?" Mara shrugged. "Only if you're ready to say yes." He didn't answer right away. There was a long, quiet pause, like his mind was typing the most important command of his life. And then, he nodded. That night, for the first time in years, Jake dreamed of himself sitting in front of an IDE, typing code. And smiling. 3 days after starting his internship, Jake handed in his resignation at the cafe. The manager was surprised, but not shocked. "I knew you weren't gonna be here forever," he said with a smile, patting Jake on the shoulder. "I just didn't think the day would come so soon." Jake shifted his entire routine into a new rhythm: early mornings for studying, afternoons working remotely with Mara's engineering team, and evenings spent reviewing lessons or learning new concepts. At first, it was overwhelming. Technical meetings full of terms he hadn't heard in 3 years. Code written by teammates that he had to read over and over just to grasp. Some nights, Jake would slump over his desk and whisper to himself, "Can I really do this?" But this time was different. He no longer ran from the feeling of not being good enough. Instead, he faced it head-on. Every buggy line, every Stack Overflow search, every failed attempt, it all counted. Every moment of clarity, every time a concept clicked, added another layer of confidence. Mara didn't baby him. She gave direct feedback, pointed out mistakes, and occasionally asked him to rewrite things from scratch. But after every round of corrections, she always added a line. "You're getting better. Don't stop." And Jake didn't stop. It no longer felt like he was just getting back into coding, it felt like he was getting back to himself, the version buried beneath layers of doubt, insecurity, and past regrets. One day, the team was tasked with redesigning the main website's interface. Mara assigned Jake a small part, a component to display customer reviews. It sounded simple, but to him, it meant everything. It would be the first time his code would go live on a real product. When deployment finished and he saw his component running smoothly on the homepage, Jake sat still for a long while. His heart raced, just like it used to, back when he first got a program to run after hours of struggle. In that moment, he didn't need praise. Didn't need applause. That feeling that he was exactly where he was meant to be was enough. He wasn't a barista who knew a bit of code anymore. He was a developer. A real one. That night, sitting in his small apartment, Jake opened his terminal. He typed, bash. Saw chap. Chin sua. Echo, I'm back. And this time, there was no hesitation. No looking at the past as failure, just a detour he had to take to find clarity. The door was open. And this time, Jake stepped through it without waiting for anyone to pull him in. 3 months passed faster than Jake expected. From a barista who knew a bit of coding, he had become an essential part of the product development team. The insecurity that once weighed him down had given way to focus and passion. Technical meetings no longer filled him with dread. Instead, they became places where he asked questions, proposed solutions, and occasionally earned nods of approval from veteran engineers. On the last day of his internship, Mara sent him a short email. Instead of wishing you luck, I'm sending you an offer. Full-time. You in? Jake read that line over and over. Not because he doubted it, but because it moved him. He didn't reply right away. Instead, he stepped out onto the balcony, sat down, and stared out at the Seattle night. The city lights shimmered like lines of code running through his mind, logical, ordered, and alive. He thought back to the day he opened that old laptop again. The day he dared to face the question, what did I once dream of? Back to that one simple thing Mara had asked, why are you here? A question that, if heard at any other moment, might have been brushed off. Jake opened his laptop and typed his reply. I'm in. And thank you for not letting me forget who I am. The full-time role started a week later. No longer an intern, Jake was now officially a front-end developer. 3 days a week in the main office, 2 remote. The first time he signed an email with the company address under his name, he paused, not because he didn't believe it, but because he was savoring it. The moment a tiger sees its reflection in the mirror. Every now and then, he still dropped by the old cafe. Not behind the counter anymore, but at the familiar corner table where he first saw Mara, where his story began again. His former manager would always joke. What, a hotshot developer still needs his espresso? Jake would just smile. Being a developer doesn't mean forgetting coffee. But now, the cup of coffee wasn't a place to hide anymore, it was a reminder of where he came from, and how far he'd walked from there. If anyone ever asked Jake what changed his life, he wouldn't say an internship or a great mentor. He'd say it was a fleeting moment. A pause where he finally looked inward, and didn't look away. Jake had come to understand one thing, deeply. True change doesn't come from the outside. It begins the moment you're brave enough to see who you really are and choose to believe it.